make it our business. A climate podcast that's about innovators, change makers, and entrepreneurs who are taking actions, creating solutions, and inspiring many. This podcast is supported by US Department of State, created by BBC Media Action, India.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who has the latest gadget of all?
You, and all of us, of course.
And what happens to the old gadgets? Hear this fact. The world's generation of electronic waste is rising 5 times faster than documented e-waste recycling, the UN's 4th Global E-Waste Monitor reveals today. The 62 million tons of e-waste generated in 2022 would fill 1.55 million 40-ton trucks, roughly enough trucks to form a bumper-to-bumper line encircling the equator, according to the report from ITU and UNITAR. Welcome to Cool It Down, the podcast that dives deep into sustainable solutions for our planet's most pressing challenges. I'm Sayema, and today we are tackling an issue that's growing faster than we realize: electronic waste or e-waste. From smartphones to laptops, we are all part of the tech-driven world. But what happens to our gadgets once we are done with them? Sit tight and listen to this episode carefully, because this episode is a treasure trove of ideas that are brilliant for the climate entrepreneurs. Joining us today is Laureate Professor Veena Sahajwalla. She's an internationally recognized material scientist, engineer, and inventor revolutionizing recycling science. And also Mandeep Manocha, co-founder and present CEO of Cashify. Welcome to Cool It Down, Veena. How are we doing today?
Really, really good, Sayema, and thank you so much for having me on your program.
We all know e-waste is growing fast around the world. Can you explain how improper e-waste disposal harms the environment and adds to climate change?
Yeah, look, if we're not, appreciating the fact that there are really valuable materials that are present in our electronic devices, we're missing out on a really important resource that we have actually made to produce these devices. These electronic devices contain important materials, and so there could be metals, there could be plastics, and of course, we're effectively just discarding it at the end of life. And if we do that, then we're missing out on an opportunity to be able to harvest them effectively as resources, as useful materials. And of course, if we can indeed recognize and appreciate the value that's embedded in these resources, we can bring these resources right back into remanufacturing. So I think we really need to be savvy in the way we think about electronics, not just during the time that we actually use it, but actually we need to think about all those embedded materials that are present in our devices. And just because a device is obsolete or doesn't work anymore, that doesn't really mean that, for example, the metals that were embedded in those circuit boards are no longer useful, or, your hard drive that now is not exactly doing the job you wanted to do. That doesn't mean that those important materials that are present in, for instance, magnets are no longer useful. We still have effectively a whole resource. It's a brand new mine. We just have to see it as a micro mine, and effectively we're all in some way or another owners of these micro mines, whether they're lying around in our homes or in our offices. So I think we owe it to our planet to be able to recognize that the energy and the materials that have gone into making these devices in the first place, that we have to actually look at end of life as a way to not just see it as discarding things into landfill, but rather really challenging ourselves to do better.
Veena, that's a terrific perspective to have, that we've got to appreciate, we've got to think beyond just using a gadget. We've got to think the way we are talking about it. But I want you to go a step forward and also explain how, when we dispose of electronic waste, it really harms the environment and it adds to climate change. How does that happen?
Well, I mean, if you're actually throwing something away, what you have done is all of that energy. So think about those important metals like copper, like tin. The energy that went into making it in the first place is already been invested in producing those important metals. Now, if you actually don't harvest those materials, effectively you're losing not just the materials, but you're actually losing all of that energy that you had invested. And so every time you think about recycling important metals, every time you think about these materials being put back into remanufacturing, what you're effectively doing is saving the planet a lot of that energy that you would have had to spend in the first place. But you've now recycled it, you've put it back into use again and again, so you don't have to spend all of that energy that you had to put into mining those ores, and processing those ores, but rather really looking at those metals as effectively a resource of both materials and energies.
E-waste has harmful substances like lead and mercury, and we can, go over speaking about that, but I want you to highlight the risks which this informal e-waste recycling poses, especially in India, and how does it affect our ecosystems?
Yeah, look, it's a really important question. What are we actually doing to our electronic waste at the end of life? So,
Right.
For example, if people, are simply burning plastics, but what could well happen in there is that you may well liberate harmful elements that at some temperatures, you can have metals that can vaporize, go into gases. And so if you've created lead in that vapor form, what you're doing, sadly, is you're creating all these pollutants that you could effectively, as human beings, you could be breathing that. So think about all those harmful elements that by burning metals or these kinds of devices, if you're actually liberating that into the gas.
Right, and that's exactly what I wanted to come to. But before that, I think I should just re-emphasize every word that you've put there, which begins with understanding the problem, thinking about it, sensitively thinking about it, and safety. I want to come to the e-waste micro factory of yours, which is a game changer. Would you like to explain how it works and how it turns waste into useful materials, Veena?
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about, e-waste microfactory, the important thing to bear in mind is that, one, it is designed with the intention to be fit for purpose. And so when I talk about fit for purpose technologies, what I mean by that in the case of our e-waste microfactory is to be able to say what is the purpose we're trying to achieve. So if we're trying to produce different kinds of metals, how would we expect to process our input feedstock? So the fact that in e-waste, we've got so many different kinds of materials, different components, whether they are our hard drives to circuit boards, we have to remember that one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah, indeed.
The fact that we're talking about harvesting these important elements and compounds, whether, we've got different kinds of metals, and if we want to talk about rare earth oxides, for instance, we need to be able to have different modules that are fit for purpose. So harvesting those important materials, and we also need to design and develop those modular systems so that each of these modules can do its own function. So we need to start to think about functioning modules, saying I've got a recycling system, and then you realize that you've produced materials that are of poor quality. So the important decision that you have to make, and which is why a microfactory enables that decision-making process, is by bringing that micro-recycling science and the fundamental scientific approach that you need to deploy, which can then be controlled separately in different modules. And if you can do that, then of course you can control the properties and quality of the output material. Because only when you actually can achieve the right quality, again, that fit for purpose quality can be achieved if your technological pathways are doing the right thing. But, I mean, the question always is, how do you know you're doing the right thing? And this is where, of course, the underpinning micro-recycling science is there to inform users. So, I don't have to necessarily be someone who's a scientist to fully appreciate that, okay, if I've got standard procedures, a module that I'm focusing on, for example, producing a certain metal alloy, or I'm focusing on producing a certain rare earth oxide, then I can control, for example, those operating parameters, and I can then have very targeted quality output. And of course, that matters, because when you want to put these important materials back into supply chains and you want to demonstrate that they're ready to be used as remanufactured materials, a buyer will still want to have quality feedstock. So it's really addressing the whole of circular economy and, of course, indeed, safe circular economy.
I love the way you're emphasizing on the words proper, the words, methodical, effective, detailing. Those are the key words, and we've got to really adhere to them if we have to address the real issue here. Veena, I'm talking to a leader in green manufacturing and the circular economy. For aspiring entrepreneurs out there, what opportunities do you see in starting sustainable businesses focused on e-waste collection, recycling, or repurposing?
Yeah, look, I would say, for those budding entrepreneurs who, care for planet, who can, bring their passion in terms of caring for planet and people and, really creating a better future for everyone, is to be able to think about how they can collaborate and work together. So the fact that, the solutions we talk about, microfactory modules, that collectively you can create, a cluster of various, modular systems, that also means that you can think about collaboration. And it could well be collaboration with those that are collecting some of these end-of-life devices. You might be somebody who wants to go back and look at, for example, what kind of materials are present in terms of that plastic or that metal. And it could well be that you collaborate with somebody who complements the work that you're doing. Because I think together we can all achieve the right outcomes. So, creating an ecosystem where really everybody wins. And I think when everybody wins, the planet benefits, because, we do want to have those safe working conditions for people. And of course, we want to be able to generate the right kind of outputs. And of course, we want to be able to show that there are lots of different kinds of materials. You don't have to have a giant mega smelter to achieve these kinds of goals. So to be able to have various modules where you can start to think about collaborative efforts where there could be a lot of electronic waste coming through the pipeline, and indeed even going and looking at what local landfills look like in the region where you are, to be able to start to imagine, what if we could be seeing our local landfills as mines of the future?
Yeah, that's perfect. A huge thank you to Veena Sahajwalla for sharing her incredible insights on the e-waste crisis and the exciting innovations that are transforming the way we think about e-waste. It's clear that the problem of e-waste is much bigger than just disposing of old gadgets. It's about protecting our environment, reducing toxic pollution, creating new opportunities for sustainable business. Thank you so much, Veena, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on your program.
Let's get down to the business of e-waste recycling. We are thrilled to be joined by Mandeep Manocha, co-founder of Cashify, a platform that's helping people sell and recycle their old gadgets. E-waste is a huge problem, but it's also an opportunity for innovation. So how do we tackle this crisis, and what can we as individuals and entrepreneurs do to make a difference? Let's find out. Thank you so much, Mandeep, for joining us today.
Thank you, Sayema. Thank you for inviting me today.
What inspired you to start Cashify, and how does it help solve the e-waste problem in India?
Sure. Sayema, we started about 11 years ago with the thought of building a recycling company, or specifically focusing on waste management. we figured that electronic waste is something which is a growing problem. But it was not a problem till it was lying in people's drawers. And I'm sure, most of us have something lying in the drawer, maybe an old phone or a laptop or a charger, etc.
A drawer
Uh,
full of such gadgets, actually.
yeah, yeah. So, we started working with a few brands to figure out innovative ways of bringing these out. But very soon we realized that the brand promise or the communication that we were doing is, bring out your old devices. It is the right thing to do. It's a sustainable choice. But we were not getting a lot of traction. Then we went back to the drawing board and we realized that we have to, mix the elements of economics in it. If we give people something in return, which essentially, if we could ideally give cash for the old devices or gadgets, people would be happy to, part with them. That's where the genesis of Cashify happened. We started buying used laptops and smartphones. And we saw a lot of people actually coming onto the platform because we made it very simple for them to evaluate the old device. With simple few clicks, they could get the price of old devices which are lying in their drawers. And we would go to their homes, pick it up, and give them cash instantly. So that's how, the journey of Cashify started, from electronic waste tackling problem to actually, moving to extending the life of the products. But because we realized that most of the devices which are lying in people's homes, they have some kind of life left in them. So before the recycling step, there is a step called reuse. So if you could reuse and extend the life of the product, it's better for the environment. And there are so many people who can't afford, gadgets at higher price. So we thought, given India has a demographic where you could sell everything at the right price point, so we could find a match, and then that's how Cashify came into being.
So, Mandeep, truly, I mean, it started with a passion for a cause to make a difference.
Correct.
And then you figured out how to
Yeah.
do this. You were just determined that you'll do something about it, right?
Sure. Yes.
E-waste offers business opportunities, as we can see. What advice would you give to people who want to start a business in this space?
E-waste, interestingly, as I said earlier, if your old device is lying somewhere in your house, it's not causing any harm to the environment. People say that these devices have harmful elements which leach into the ground, etc. They do that once they reach the landfill.
Yes.
But most of these devices are lying inside people's houses. So I think the thing to solve for in this space is the sourcing side, the collection of these devices, which
Right.
requires a lot of education effort, building innovative ways for people to part ways with these gadgets. Recycling is not a difficult process, but the difficult part is how do you get access to these? So that's where, a lot of education has to come into picture. You can build innovative programs with, institutions like colleges and schools, educate kids to, part away with devices in their homes, do the right thing. OEMs and brands have a very big role to play in terms of the incentivization for these, recycling efforts. Because as you know, we all are guilty of it. We don't like to part away with our stuff for free. I mean, as a society, we sell our old newspapers, bottles, everything. So why do we give away these devices for free? Just saying that is the right thing may not cut out. So there's a lot of stakeholders that are involved. And for any, entrepreneur who wants to build, something innovative in this business, has to solve for the sourcing part and incentivization part.
Right. So, how to get them to participate in what you want to achieve, Mandeep? I want to come back to that point where you said that as long as these gadgets are lying at home, it's not a cause of concern.
Yeah.
A lot of, recent research and studies are showing that if you're going to fill your home and your almirahs with gadgets which are of no use today, a lot of chemical secretion is also happening, like lead and all of that, which is actually getting mixed in the air that we breathe. So maybe it's not such a good idea to just, stock the unused mobile phones and laptops and all of these things, even for personal health.
Yeah, that's true. To an extent, what you're saying, Sayema, is correct. But essentially, I would look at it from a very different perspective, that these are valuable resources that are lying unused, right? So more than these leaching out in the open environment or in the air, that's pretty hard. It does not actually leach that much. But look at it from lens that every time a new product is manufactured, we put a lot of pressure on the environment or the resources. there has to be mining for metals, there has to be, when you manufacture glass, there's a lot of electricity and water that is consumed. So if you look at it from a perspective that there is actually a lot of valuable material lying in your house, and if you bring that out, you could actually avoid a lot of mining and other effort. I think that is a very, that's a better lens to look at it, rather than, looking it from a lens that, the environment is going to get harmed because it's lying in your drawer. That hardly happens, Simon.
Right. Mandeep, from your experience with Cashify, what are the important lessons? And if you can just, like 5 points that other entrepreneurs can learn about handling e-waste responsibly, what would they be?
Handling e-waste responsibly, there has to be a proper process. You have to, as I said, the first step is sourcing. How do you incentivize people to bring those devices back to the mainstream? Second, proper handling. While you're transporting the material, there are some special protocols that you need to take care so that there is no spillage. When it reaches the facility has to be, of a certain protocol, and there are guidelines which the Pollution Control Board has put in place. For instance, the flooring of the facility has to be proper concrete so that there are no leachates that go down.
Interesting.
Then the fourth step is the people that you employ, proper protection has to be provided to them in terms of safety gear, because these guys are dealing with stuff which could be potentially harmful. And
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, I've seen places in and around Delhi where they employ kids of very young age. There are women working with bare hands, and it really hampers their health, and it's a really it's a pity sight. So I think bringing this business into mainstream actually brings in a lot of health and safety elements for the people who are working in it. And finally, one of the things that I've always said is you have to involve the unorganized sector and make them part of the value chain, rather than building your own business and setup which completely removes the unorganized sector. So you have to work hand in hand. You have to bring these people to the mainstream, because they have been working in this space for many years. So you have to take an approach of inclusiveness, rather than building a profitable enterprise and completely shunning away the people who have been working in this space for a long time.
Community participation, and everybody feels like a stakeholder.
Yeah.
I think that's just the best approach to have. Mandeep, what needs to change in India's system to manage e-waste better? How can startups help drive that change? Any exciting trends that you're seeing in this direction?
Well, I think the most important thing that has to happen is more participation from brands and OEMs. The government has been really forthcoming in, coming out with e-waste management rules. They have been trying to, push the envelope and, pushing the brands to comply. But the brands have to also, take it in a more serious manner. And one of the important things that, we feel at Cashify can be achieved is the devices and gadgets which are lying in people's homes can be brought out. But there has to be incentivization, which could be in the form of a simple voucher. Say, for instance, I'm giving an old phone for a particular brand. Can the same brand give me, say, a 2,000 rupee voucher or a 3,000 rupee voucher
That's
for a new
right.
purchase of the same product or a similar product from their brand category? Today, that is not happening. For instance, if I have to, discard my old refrigerator, you get 2,000 rupees, 2,500 rupees for the refrigerator. Now, if a brand can come in and say, okay, if you buy the same brand refrigerator for the new refrigerator that you're buying, I'm going to give in a voucher of 5,000 rupees. It makes the conversation completely different. The people are incentivized.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Today, that's not happening.
I think that's a great strategy, because most people would grab this opportunity where they have to exchange their old gadget for a new one with a substantial discount.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great strategy.
I'll give you an example. We run exchange programs for all the brands today. But today the exchange is valid if you bring an old device which is in the working condition. Right? So you get, say, for example, $100 for the old device. The brand puts in $20 and says, okay, if you're buying my product, you'll get 120. I think the same can be done for devices which are not working, which are almost e-waste, because essentially that's going to increase the sales of the company.
That's right. That's right. I think, the bigger brands need to really come out and rethink how to sell their new products, and in a very responsible way. I think that's going to be remarkable.
Yeah.
So as I understand, the obvious thing for individuals to contribute to this cause is very intentionally thinking about getting rid of those gadgets which they haven't used, let's say, even once in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
But what are the other things people can do to reduce their e-waste? And how can we move towards smarter gadget use as a society?
Okay, I think people can, from a consumption point of view, we are changing things very fast. If something stops working, we just think of changing the product rather than getting it repaired. For instance, you must have personally seen most of the time people, when they think of changing their old smartphone, is because the battery life becomes, shorter.
Yeah.
Now that's not the most, valid reason for you to change the smartphone. You can get the battery replaced, and it can, work beautifully for the next 2 years.
Right.
So, responsible consumption is something which is important. Second, accepting repair as an alternative is very, very important. And thirdly, if something, is not working, please don't throw them in the dustbin. There are companies who can come to your doorstep to collect them and get them, recycled responsibly. But please do not throw them in the dustbin, because then it will eventually go to the landfill and all the problems start from there.
Right. So don't discard, repair and reuse, and take a
Yes.
lot of pride in doing that. Mandeep, my last question to you is, looking ahead, where do you see the future of e-waste management in India, and what are Cashify's next big goals?
Well, the future of e-waste in India is pretty bright. There are a lot of companies who are setting up innovative technologies to extract metals and make this business viable. The government is pushing really hard for compliance. The OEMs have to, take a step further, and as I said, incentivize the collection of e-waste. I think as a combination of these three, I'm sure that we would be at the forefront of e-waste recycling and be, a role model for the world. For Cashify, we continue to expand our categories. Today, we buy used smartphones. Very recently, we've, started our focus in laptops. We are also now accepting tablets, smartwatches, and soon we will add other categories like TV, refrigerators, air conditioners. We are very excited to be in this space, and we feel that India and the way the consumption is happening, responsible consumption is going to be the talk of the town very soon, and we are going to make our contribution in a little way.
That's fantastic. We've got to make a beginning, and we pledged that we would. Thank you so much, Mandeep. It was a pleasure speaking to you today.
Thank you so much, Sayema.
Hope you've gathered a treasure trove of information and inspiration in this episode of Cool It Down. After all, we've got to cool it down. Remember, next time you want to buy a gadget, we'll think first if we can repair it and give it some more longevity. We'll use it for a while, please. And more climate entrepreneurs need to join the bandwagon, as there is a potential in e-waste in India. So that's it for today. This is me, Sayema, signing off from another episode and leaving you with loads of ideas and things to do today, hopefully. And with a promise to be back with many more climate connections, business ideas and takeaways to cool it down. Make sure you check back soon.
Cool it down. Let's make it our business.